Hey everybody, how you doing? Hopefully you haven't had lunch yet, otherwise you're very sleepy. We're going to try to make this a little bit different. I'm going to just do a very brief presentation, and then my colleague Geoff and I together with a moderator are going to be exploring this topic a little bit more. Just curious, who in the audience is familiar with DID, Decentralized Identity? Do we have any fans? Cool. So I'm going to be introducing Ontology very briefly and what they've been doing for the last couple of years. The name might be familiar to some of you, might not be to others. They've been around for quite some time. They started their work in 2017 when they joined the Decentralized Identity Foundation. They built in 2018 ONT ID, which is their implementation of the DID standard. So it's an open standard from the W3C. And in that year, it was also added to the DID documentation. Soon after, they also launched their wallet, Onto, and their L1 chain. In 2020, they introduced OScore, which I'm going to dive a little bit more deeply in a little bit. And then they've continued to build the infrastructure necessary to build out this technology for decentralized identity or private identity solutions for enterprises and individuals. More importantly, in this year, Ontology announced a $10 million fund to continue to push the innovation forward of decentralized identity. So if you in the audience are a developer or a blockchain and you want to learn how you can participate in this, please look me up. I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that. I'm going to share some of the key metrics or really interesting metrics, in my opinion, for ONT ID. Firstly, in terms of its kind of adoption, 1.5 million users are the number of identities that have been created with ONT ID. There's been some really interesting concepts that have been developed with ONT ID too. One of the partnerships that Ontology did with the Daimler Mobility team, to kind of prove the way that identities or decentralized identities can be used in the consumer space. In this case, how you can save preferences from one vehicle to another, a luxury I'm sure not many of us have, but it's a fun one. Imagine renting a vehicle and being able to automatically port over some of your preferences into that vehicle just by signing in using a global identity. Currently, it's been integrated to 7 blockchains, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but that is one of the most widely distributed DIDs, especially in the blockchain space. And the goal for this year, by the end of the year, is to be able to go to 100. So quite a significant jump. It's why we're here. It's why we want to engage with all of you developers to find how we can solve these identity problems for you, your users, and for the products that you're building. Ontology is kind of already discussed. Or should I say ONT ID is Ontology's decentralized identity solution based on an open standard from the W3C. It's built to provide a secure, scalable solution for private identities, and it is blockchain agnostic. So if you are familiar with blockchain identities, you create a wallet, it is very much just there to solve a problem for that blockchain. With DID, you can have this universal identity where you can bind multiple wallets. So it doesn't really care if you're on Ethereum, if you're on Ontology, if you're on Base, it works everywhere. That's one of the benefits to it. Just continuing to talk about some of its functionality and kind of use cases and value propositions. The really interesting one to me is all the way in the end when it talks about these private proofs and attestations. So instead of having all of this on-chain data where you leak this information on-chain and it's permanent, using verifiable credentials, which is the yin to the yang of DID, it allows you to create these private proofs that are then revealable only by the user, right? So selective disclosure of this information. And even then, it doesn't leak all that information. I know Abril was talking about that earlier, so she talked about ZK proofs a little bit more extensively. That same technology is under the hood of DIDs and VCs. This is really the suite of products for ONT ID. Starting with, of course, its identifier, which is ONT ID. Then it's the login, which is, think of like sign in with Twitter, sign in with Google, but with a decentralized identifier. You sign in with ONT ID. You have ONTag, which is that gateway that sits between the protocol and the application for issuing and verifying identities. And then you have OScore, which is that reputation scoring algorithm that Ontology built, where you can develop a credit score that works off-chain, but it allows for a much less obscure experience versus maybe traditional credit scores as we know them today. We've continued to build on this, and this just really kind of shows the functionality of ONTag and the relationship between the protocols and the application. The functionality of OScore has continued to be developed. I'm very proud to say that I was one of the leads in this project, Orange Protocol. We built it a few years ago, and the idea was, how can we extend the value of decentralized identity and private proofs beyond just the ontology chain? So we developed it to be able to onboard new applications, new use cases, new protocols. And the way that it works really is you can, as a user, sign in. A decentralized identity is created for you at sign-in with that same functionality that I talked about earlier, where it creates a seamless identity for you that works across multiple chains. You can then discover and participate in different quests that are developed by our partners, and those quests then are proving that you've completed it, whether that means I've engaged with some sort of social campaign or interaction on a platform like X, or I've provided liquidity on a DeFi protocol, or I've voted on a proposal. All of these different things are then provable using these private attestations as verifiable credentials. And then the flexibility of it, this is really was our hurrah moment at the time that we built this product. I don't know if you are really into DID, you'll remember that there were two camps. The Vitalik camp that was saying everything should be on-chain, so about tokens, and then there was the camp that's like, no, everything should be off-chain, like we don't really like our data on-chain, and we kind of went and did that meme. It's like, why not both? Why not take advantage of the value proposition of like private proofs, but also the value proposition of on-chain primitives? And so we developed a system that abstracts the private data away from the verifiable credentials and then provides an SBT to the user that continues to prove that, but removes all of that private information. Ouse Wallet is another really cool product, and I kind of talked about it a little bit at the top of the presentation. This is Ontology's wallet that makes it very easy for anybody to create a decentralized identity. It's really it's not valuable if you have to go through like hoops in order to create a decentralized identity. The way that Ouse Wallet works is you create a wallet and a decentralized identity is immediately created with that wallet, and it binds that first identity to that DID. Kind of one of the cool benefits of DID is that you can then proceed to bind multiple wallets to that same identity. And going back to that Orange Protocol piece, you can start building reputation across all of these different identities using these private proofs that are portable and work across different chains. So you can imagine kind of the cool value in that is if you're doing really interesting things on Solana and you want to kind of show and prove that to a community on Base, you can do that by porting over that reputation. And one of the interesting use cases, as we'll talk about this, is if you're a DeFi protocol and you have that platform on multiple blockchains, you can actually reward your users by providing them with these credentials that state, hey, I provided a ton of liquidity on Solana. Sure, I might not be doing the same thing on Ethereum or some other chain, but I should be able to gain some value in return based on my participation elsewhere. Interestingly, you could also segment those users and provide them access and new rewards to incentivize them to do some cool actions on a different blockchain, or maybe say that's your campaign. Every blockchain that we go to, you're going to get an incentive because we know the value you're creating in some other chain. Another use case, I'm a creator. I have my own podcast. Who doesn't? I'd like to be able to reward those people who are collecting my content on chain. I want to be able to reward people who come up and show up to any event or IRL experience that I'm hosting. I can also provide them with a credential, which then allows me to retroactively reward them. Airdrops, who doesn't like that? I can do that for my fans. Any protocol can do that. If you're a blockchain staking provider, you could do the same thing. So if you're interested in learning more, these are the Ontology links, but you can look me up on Twitter. I'm at the Data Dude. My DMs are open on Farcaster and Lens because, that's where the world is moving. I'm at Humpty on both of those platforms. I would love to connect with you and talk more about how decentralized identity can be integrated to your platform. I think I skipped over it a little bit here, but right at the bottom, we do have that goal, and might have shared it. We do have that goal to get to 100 different integrations by the end of the year. So my goal at the end of the day is to be at least get halfway there from this project. Kidding, not kidding. All right, now we're going to go into the panel discussion moderated by our good friend here and my colleague, Geoff. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Thank you very much. We'll prepare the stage a little bit, so just give us a few seconds. And we'll do an interesting panel about cross-chain identity or decentralized identity. unfortunately, we have two mics, so maybe you guys can share the mic, and I'll hold this. So before we get started, maybe we'll do some intros. We have Geoff, so maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself. And
so I'm Geoff, ecosystem lead at Ontology. So been with Ontology, I don't know, about 3 years now. So looking at projects in Europe, so helping Humpty get to this 100 blockchain integration as quickly as possible, keep him happy. It feels a little bit strange talking about sovereignty in Brussels coming from the UK. That's a dangerous topic, so maybe I'll pass over to Humpty.
Hello everybody, and I don't think I really introduced myself, so I've actually been building on Ontology for longer than I've been contributing to Ontology. I was a developer and I was building some technology around staking and staking providing on their blockchain. Fortunate enough to get that business acquired, and then I realized I wanted to get into something that was much more novel, kind of in the emerging side of things when it came to Web3. Decentralized identity at that time was like super kind of like novel. Not everybody was talking about it. Sure, we have a lot more projects building in that space now, but Ontology, as I mentioned, has been building in this space for a very long time. So who better to work with than Ontology to kind of learn from them? They're one of the OGs, and also help to build a couple of cool products like we did with Orange Protocol as well.
Definitely. And just to give an intro to myself, my name is Robert. I'm a developer advocate at the Starknet Foundation. I'm super interested in the decentralized identity, but especially on the gaming side. I've been a big gamer overall, and especially on the Starknet side. The gaming industry have been booming, and some cool games have been live since quite a long ago. One of them is Influence, then we have Loot Survivor, and so on and so forth. So I'll be interested about this, how we can bring digital identity.
Let's add you to the 100.
Yeah, definitely. So without further ado, we can just hop in the questions. And maybe my first question would be, like, can you explain what digital identity is and how it differentiates from traditional identity systems?
I can kick off with this, yeah. So I think the big thing is for decentralized identity as opposed to traditional identity is, I mentioned sovereignty earlier, the idea of self-sovereignty. Who owns that identity? Who gives you the right for people to look at it? Who controls it? Who can sell it a lot of the time? Let's face it, your own personal data, your own identity that you collect, all those things are very valuable. Some of the biggest social media platforms in the world, that's their business model, selling the data linked to your identities. So when we talk about decentralized identity, we really get into the idea that you own it. You have sovereignty over it. You can decide what is done with it. And I think that's the key point. Link that to digital identity, that then is where you can use it, what you can do with it, and how easy it is to do things with it. Don't know if you want to.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure many of us here are not unfamiliar with like the different digital identity systems that exist today. I mean, we talked about Google. You have your Gmail, that's your identity, or you're using a Microsoft product like Azure and you have an identity there. They're actually doing some interesting stuff with DID tech as well. So that's an interesting rabbit hole to go into if you're interested. But in the Web3 space too, like we look at ENS and there's your wallet. These are all different kind of, I guess, primitives for digital identity. The interesting thing with decentralized identity is the ability to kind of build this reputation on top of that, right? So you're able to aggregate different identities into one global identity, if you will, but you can also kind of add this private attestation or reputation of your identity, which then creates a lot more value. And as my colleague here, Geoff, was saying, is that ability to protect that data, right? And then reveal that data at your leisure, like the way that you want to reveal it, to whom and how much of that you want to reveal as well. Those are all how you differentiate and the real value proposition of decentralized identity, or DID specifically, compared to other digital identity systems.
Great. Well, like Web 2 developers or Web 2 users usually I think you can say Gmail or like a mail itself is a digital identity. Whenever you're saying to someone like, hey, send me an email or you can contact me to this, those basically link to you. But I'm interested from a user perspective and overall experience on Web3. How do identity-driven experiences enhance the user experience in digital interactions overall?
So I think that's a really useful question, actually, because if you want people to use things, It's got to be useful to them. It's got to make life better. Nobody's going to do it because we say, oh, actually, you should. I'll be honest, I don't think people care too much about Facebook selling their data. Most people, right? Because it's quite easy. You just click sign in, you click OK, it makes life easy, sign in with Facebook. So the way that you plug this to people is actually showing them how it improves their life, how it can actually improve what they do. And I'll give you, let's do gaming, right? So I'm a big gamer. I'm old, I'm 47 tomorrow. You can wish me a happy birthday later if you like. So I've been gaming since I was about 7 years old. So that's about 40 years of gaming. One of the key things I've seen develop through that time, and actually from really early days, from make your own pinball machines, is this idea of user-created content, user-generated content. You know, anybody who's played Counter-Strike started off as user-generated content. It was a mod, right? And then we've continued that with generating different content. And Web3 gaming is going to, and is continuing that way of working. So where does decentralized identity come in? How does that enhance the user experience? Well, of course, Humpty was talking about reputation, being able to build reputation on top of something. Well, of course, in gaming, if you can build that reputation, I've developed this content, I've built this content, I've improved your gaming experience with my work, you want credit for that. You want rewarding for that. You want to be able to build that reputation, maybe a gamer score type thing where you can say, this is what I'm capable of. From a marketer's point of view, I want to be able to identify those people. And I want to give them some sort of incentives to do things, to work on things, to maybe I've got a new game and I want these people who are creating things, I want to identify them in a secure way and get them in there. And they want to earn from their product. They want to earn from what they've done. And also protect their IP. When you create something, you create IP, that should be linked to you. So if you link that to your decentralized identity, you have some control over it. So that's just one example for me, going to your gaming comment, where I think that really improves the experience of gaming and generating new content on gaming.
I mean, that's a big one. Obviously, I think when it comes to gaming and when it comes to these big institutions that are developing all these games, cost efficiency, right? Like, how can we make this cheaper on our end and then maximize the value on the other end? And you think about like how you can leverage these decentralized identity systems so that you can create these identities for your gamers and then allow them to be able to use all of these badges or trophies or items in game and then move them over to another game in the most seamless way possible. But the one that I think is probably relevant, I don't know how many degens we have here, but you know, there's a lot of like people who are hunting for airdrops. And I think it's really interesting when you think about like how you can prove that you actually created value consistently over time. And if you have something like a decentralized identity where you can port over this reputation, you can almost clearly see the future of like airdrops being something that is enabled by the positive value or actions that you've done in the past. And then this is an aggregate. It could be some multiple for an airdrop for the being able to use all of these like value aligned products. You know, you were an early ENS holder. I registered mine, and this is truth for 100 years. Like all of these things could then become an aggregate, a part of my reputation, which allows me to unlock even more value over time as an early user, early adopter, and early believer of these products too. So I don't think that you need to go too far into like what if. There's a lot of applications right now that we can currently take advantage of as well.
Definitely, definitely. And at one of your points earlier, you mentioned that users don't really care about their data overall. And I think, like my point of view is that it's extremely difficult to control your data. Like the applications and services and all of these things, how they have been made is just extremely difficult to, you know, be private overall. Like if you want to go to be private overall, you just have to learn about different things. And you know, like if you want to buy a laptop, you have to buy it with cash. Don't link it to a bank account, so on and so forth. So I think on the privacy side, maybe we can talk a little bit about how the privacy can be controlled as well.
Yeah, and I think we get to the idea of zero knowledge proofs, right? We get to this idea of how do you use that. I was talking to some Web 2 people the other day, and they were asking really interesting questions. I think there's some obvious things we can do with decentralized identity to control privacy. You can have time-limited sharing. You can say, I will share this for a week, and then it can stop. You can say, I will share part of this with some people, and so on. And that gives you that control of privacy on there. And I think that's really important. But this is a question I keep getting asked, which is one we need to be good at answering. And in Web 2, there's a big demand for the right to be forgotten. You have the right to be forgotten. That's actually quite a challenge for the blockchain, that right to be forgotten. So zero knowledge proofs, for me, are probably the closest we get to that. And that's the right to take away access, which is as close as we get, and I think that's important. So I think there's two answers to the question. One is that decentralized identity allows you to control who has access. It allows you to control how long, and the idea of being able to revoke that access is really, really important. And we have to make sure that that is something that gets developed and gets worked upon.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add in the privacy side. That you got it really square on. But it's really interesting also to think when you talked about revocability, it works both ways, right? And so currently, there aren't mechanisms that are very easy to implement where you can revoke access to something using on-chain privacy. You own an NFT, you own it in perpetuity. So I technically in perpetuity have access to something. Using verifiable credentials, you can actually expire the way that something works or access using that credential as well. You can expire that. So you can think about like the flexibility of a system like that where you can also leverage it for access, but also revoking that access as well.
100% agree. But yeah, in the case of revoking access, I think this is a very important UX overall. Because, for example, like in traditional Web 2 and to folks who are in EU, we have GDPR, and kind of like if you want to use that, you have to email every company or every service in particular to just remove it, and it's just tedious work. And yeah, revoking access at a click of a button, I think that will be super simple and make controlling your privacy easy and not difficult. Cool. Now, zooming a little bit out from the gaming sector, let's probably go to the financial sector. How can you decentralize identity and reputation system to transform the financial sector?
Yeah, and I, this is quite close to my heart a little bit as a thing. So I started off life as a climate scientist working on sea level and went to Singapore to work on that. And one of the things that really strikes you is the people most at risk, for instance, are those who are disenfranchised, who don't have access to bank accounts, don't have access to infrastructure, and they're more at risk than anybody else. And you can't go to Singapore without discovering Web3 and crypto. And so I got involved, and I got involved in starting to launch regional stablecoins with the idea of helping people access finance who don't have access to finance. Worked with a really cool guy who has a project in the Philippines. And one of the things that they're building is a DeFi lending scheme for people who usually, mainly women, because they don't own a lot of property, they don't have a lot of access to finance, but they run stores and get stuck for finance, for financing. Decentralized identity is something that can actually identify who they are, can identify their business models on-chain, and can access some of that on-chain liquidity with much better lending rates than actually the loan sharks that they tend to be driven into. And so identity can actually bring access to people for financial products that just don't have it. I mean, I was in Singapore. Singapore's very lucky that everybody has a lot of access to things. I'll be honest, the UK is pretty good. Humpty, the US on the whole is not bad, right? But that's not true of a lot of the world. A lot of the world don't have access. Decentralized identity combined with DeFi, being able to prove what you've done as a business with some sort of trust that this data is accurate, to be able to access finance is absolutely life-changing for people and can actually give them so many more options. That's sort of my real bull case on DeFi and decentralized identity. I think it brings some sort of democratic access to finance, which is so important.
I'm going to hit this from a different perspective. You know, when you choose to enfranchise people by providing them with an identity that works across different experiences in the real world. One of the ones that I know people were working on pretty heavily, and one that comes to mind is like WorldCoin, right? Where they're trying to implement this UBI mechanism across the world. Not a big fan of scanning your eyeballs. If you want to do it, go for it. But personally, I think that there are systems like decentralized identity that can provide the same level of provability, right? But at the same time, stream value, to these members of society, and then based on their contribution, from then on, you can continue to like increase the value that you're providing those individuals, and I think that provides a better kind of experience for everyone that's a member of society. So yeah, this is just one of the ones that I'm personally a fan of, and I know that there's a couple of projects that are kind of working in that area, and some of the applications of DID that I'm personally very excited to see continue to develop.
What do you think is like the main pain point in this area?
Education. I think that's the hardest part. It's like, how do we enable people to easily understand what is decentralized identity? To distribution, how can we get decentralized identity in people's hands? And I think there are possible ways. Like I said, Microsoft is one of the leaders in this space of DID, and they're no small, fish. They definitely have reach for that type of distribution. So there's a possibility that there's projects like Microsoft and even like Ontology through some of its partnerships with companies like Daimler Mobility, which have a much larger reach to people who are not in the traditional crypto space, to be able to gain access to these identities, and from then on to continue to build, kind of these other elements on top of that. We were just talking before even coming to the stage about the nation states who are starting to implement DID to their citizens. So this is also not something that's being done at the private level, but it's also a problem that's being explored and solved at the public level as well.
Exciting. Now, kind of like zooming from the traditional finance, going into different areas as well to see how digital identity could potentially make an impact. Let's kind of like explore what it could do in reshaping the social media interactions and online communities. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I'll probably be quite brief. I think Humpty might have more to say on this. He has a podcast. But no, in all seriousness, social media is really important. We live and breathe it all the time. Most people are in social media all the time. Now, one of the things I think is really important is, and I'm not going to go into it again, is data privacy of what you have. That is number one, but we've kind of covered that. But I think maybe more importantly is who benefits from what you do in social media. Social media has become sort of a creator's playground. That's a lot of the time while we're on there, different creators, different people putting stuff together. And the question has to be who benefits from their work and who benefits from the partnerships they make with their audience, and that backwards and forth. And I think decentralized identity linked with decentralized socials can redress the misbalance between who benefits from all the hard work that creators do and all the loyalty and all the things that supporters of those creators do.
I have a podcast. Crypto Sapiens, if y'all want to know. Anyways, no one asked. So in terms of social, I think that there's some really interesting experiments happening right now. And, Geoff was alluding to kind of some of the traditional social systems. We talked about like Facebook and Google also being some of these more influential companies in the identity space, right? So you have a Facebook account, you can leverage that identity to work there, use their applications, you can sign in with those accounts as well across other platforms. But a lot of that value just gets locked in there, the data just gets stuck there, and they're monetizing all that information. It's very difficult to kind of get that information out of there. One of the cool experiments that's happening right now, and maybe y'all have heard about it, Farcaster, I think it's a really interesting experience for people to kind of build this unique identity also that works across different applications. So at the protocol level, you have this identity, and not saying that they're using decentralized identity, but to allude to social identities, how you can kind of build value on top of that. So for me, I'm at Humpty, at Farcaster. I can take that same identity and use it across different applications, financial applications, games. I can use that for social applications to build my, social wealth, if you will, and then retain that value, right? And that value is returned to me by the influence that I have on that network, but also through airdrops on that network. There are different applications that come in, and their onboarding experience, like many in the crypto space, have to do with airdrops. So you can see how there's an opportunity here to build something that brings that value back to the user, to the creator, versus retained by the protocol or the company like Facebook or Google or Twitter or X. So yeah, I think that those are some interesting ways of doing that. But aside from that, with decentralized identity, if Farcaster were ever to be interested in exploring that, I am knocking on their door all the time, asking when can we implement that. You have this opportunity to now think like, well, what if I could take all this like social equity that I've built on Farcaster and take it to Lens, right? So there's all of these different social systems still in the crypto space that are fractured. You can unify that using decentralized identity as well.
Cool. Now, maybe just an off-topic question. So basically with digital identity in a social media space, do you think a full privacy aspect of it would be beneficial for overall system, or will be having also some cons in general? Because from what I've seen, a lot of anons on social media, they tend not to kind of like be responsible for the things that they are saying, and it could be sometimes harmful for a certain project, or it could be sometimes beneficial. So I think there's actually a trade-off between the two of them, but it's difficult to get the right balance, I would say. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is a really difficult question. I kind of come down on the side that people have the right to be privacy, even if they're going to be knobs. Unpleasant people, if you're not English. I don't know if everybody uses the term knob, sorry. That's where I come. My worry would be, is what I would never want to advocate for is some sort of reputation scoring in such a way that we can have people outed as who they are, and like with massively negative reputations, stopping them getting some sort of jobs or getting that dystopian idea, I think would be absolutely horrendous. I'd prefer to take privacy and putting up with trollish behavior on social media than trying to score it or mark it. But I think it's a huge discussion that social media platforms probably will have to have at some point.
I mean, anons need to play too, but they need to play nice. And I definitely agree with this idea that you don't want to create a social scoring system where it negatively impacts someone's ability to play and participate. I think social media is a multiplayer game, right? And there's an opportunity to opt in to participate in different side quests as well. And the developers of those games have the ability to select who they wish to participate. And knobs? Is that what you called them? If you're being a knob, you might be excluded from participating in some of these side quests. So you can, do all the knobbish things that you want on a social platform, but knowingly that you may be excluded from some other opportunity where you can get some value in return from that. And I think that that's part of that social mechanism, right, where your peers themselves will kind of define what that is. And to be kind of also a little bit more open about the Orange Protocol system and talking about the openness, less obscurity of it, every single partner that we work with gets to define what that reputation algorithm will do. It is not defined by Ontology. Ontology provides the tools for you to be able to do that. But if you created a game, if you want people to participate and you want to include people into that game, you get to define the type of players that you want in that game and the way that you're going to reward those players too. So it's self-selecting as well, and it's open, and it's not shouldn't be defined or owned by one company, or else we're back to kind of the same systems that we are playing today.
100% agree.
I just pick up on that actually, Humpty. I think I'm kind of a believer, I'm not sure if this is a cool thing to say in this company, I'm kind of a believer that there's never anything new, right? What we're doing is stuff that's always been done just with new tech, and it does it in an easier way. And exactly what Humpty just described, clubs and memberships have been doing that forever, right? They set up their membership agreements, they set up rules and regulations, they set up how you behave if you're going to be part of this group. It's not new, we just need to do the same things.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's definitely a challenging aspect of it, but I think this is the way to go to, and give the possibility to the developers and users to own and control their digital identities overall. Now, earlier you mentioned several businesses like Facebook and so on. So maybe we could go and explore in this area, like what value do decentralized identities brings to brands and businesses overall?
So I think let's flip it on its head a little bit. We've been talking about users a lot. So if we're going to talk about brands and businesses, I think the big one is market segmentation. I sort of mentioned it earlier, that ability to really understand your users, the interconnectivity of those users. So if you've got a decentralized identity that goes everywhere, across chain, in real life, wherever you want it to be, and those users decide to share information with you and share data and share reputation and all these different things, share their scoring or rewards, then as a marketer, if you can access that and understand that market much better, understand where they link, what they do, you can target specific audiences, you can reward specific audiences, you can launch something new and know the sort of people you want to get in the beta version of it. And I think that's a really strong advantage for brands and businesses to take advantage of some of the things that decentralized identity can do. Flip it back to the consumer. Well, what does that mean? It means if you decide to share certain things, you can get early access, you can get airdrops, you can get rewards, you can get participation in things that you might have been shut out of previously. And I think that's quite a cool interplay between consumer and business and consumer and brand, in that it almost opens up a conversation backwards and forwards by allowing consumers to understand and share what they want to share, and brands to better understand the consumer.
I would say if Facebook decided to implement decentralized identity, I would be a huge fan for it, allowing the user to then be able to manage their identities and their data. I think that'd be really interesting. I don't think it'll happen. We were talking about like brands and the value. Like, I don't know every single company that this business owns, but LVMH, they own a bunch of different brands, all in the luxury space. And I think this one to me is probably the most interesting, because the luxury space got a very interesting audience. I'm not in it. I could imagine a world in which LVMH has a digital identity or a decentralized identity for their customers, and it tracks the purchase history and ownership of different assets, luxury assets. And there was pushback for NFTs, so there might be an opportunity here for a non-on-chain, primitive to work instead, where you have through your LVMH app, your account that has a decentralized identity attached to it, and you can see all of the different assets, bags, I don't know what they sell, everything that they sell. And then you can then enable some sort of reward for these consistent purchasers, people who have over time collected this history of products, and then invite them to special events, right? Exclusive just to them across the entire line of products. You can then do some collaborations with other luxury companies like Rolex and other companies like Porsche. My luxury brand knowledge is limited to that. But you can imagine the opportunities where now you have this ecosystem of people who are in this circle, who are being rewarded. And again, they have the opportunity to opt out as well, based on the information that they choose to share. So just to give like a very basic example, using one of the bigger names that I know of, where there could be an opportunity for like brands to be able to leverage decentralized identity and the private proofs that are based on that, and the rewards then after that.
Great points there. And maybe we could, we talked a little bit about privacy, but maybe we can dig deeper a little bit and investigate, because every business or every country has different regulations and privacy regulations. So My question would be, how might decentralized identity impact privacy laws and regulations, and what are like the possibilities here?
I personally think this is potentially one of the biggest challenges identity faces across the board. So I was speaking to the person who led Bhutan's decentralized identity. So Bhutan as a country has just launched their own self-sovereign decentralized identity for the entire country, which is really cool. One of the things that they have is a lack of access from other businesses being able to access or do things with that identity. I think in part because whilst it's self-sovereign and they've got it, it's protecting that privacy of the users, protecting that sovereignty of the users from other things and making sure that the laws are kept in line with what they want. How do you do that globally, I think is very, very, very difficult. It becomes easier. I believe the EU at the moment are doing a confederated decentralized identity. So it's sort of they're going to be running it kind of themselves, so it's not fully self-sovereign. And I think these pathways to legislation and getting that red tape right is what the EU are good at, frustratingly so sometimes, but it is what they're good at. As we start doing that, you'll see some agreements made with the states, and I think we'll build up a global consensus on how this works. There's sort of precedence for this. Passports, right? We have passports. They're accepted globally. They're accepted as a way of doing things. I think over time, we will see this legislation mapped out. It's already being done. I think EU's decentralized identity launches next year. It's already been mapped out. It's already happening. That will make it easier across the board, I think, to answer those questions.
Yeah, I don't have much else to add aside from the fact that I don't want to be carrying a wallet with my ID. I don't want to be carrying a passport. We're in a society where we have gone to like these mobile devices that are with us all the time. I'd love to be able to prove my identity anywhere I go in the world in a verifiable way, right? Because right now, if I take a picture of my ID or my passport, it's not worth very much. But if a national government were to issue an identity in that way, then there's validity, there's proof in that, because you're trusting the issuer, which in this case is a nation state. And I think that we're, like Geoff said, we're not far from that. That's already in the works. And I look forward to the day where I'm able to be able to engage in the physical world with these virtual identities as well.
Well said, and I think from my point of view, I'm not sure if you experienced this, but I guess 1 month ago I was booking into a hotel, and they asked my passport, and they took it, and they took a scan of it, and the scan stays there, so there's no reassurance for me that identity will be deleted anytime soon, and I think this happened across a lot of places. So I'm really looking forward to the digital identity, the way to revoke certain identities from them, and I'm super excited about this.
If you could revoke that access when you're done, and you don't need my information anymore.
Exactly. Like I'm done with the hotel, and after that I can revoke it and good to go. Okay, we're reaching an end of this mini panel. Maybe some final remarks for our audience that you would like to say?
We were talking earlier, and decentralized identity, I actually find quite exciting. That might not be the best thing to tell people when I first meet them, but I do. And the reason I think it's exciting is because I think it's a bit like Thanos. It's inevitable, right? It's coming. It's going to be across Web3. It's going to be in your day-to-day lives. It's going to make life easier, and it's going to give you more control, and it's going to give you more privacy, and it will give you so many options that we've spoken about to take control of things, to own things, to map and monitor things without a third party having to be involved. And it's just going to make life easier. And so I think it's really exciting. If you developing, if you're building product, I know sometimes people are so focused on building what they need to build that maybe things like identity don't get thought about, but it is coming. So the earlier you think about it, the better, I think.
For me, I mean, it's just look me up. I love talking about this stuff too. Like I've been building in this space now for a little over 3 years with Ontology and building products with decentralized identity and just exploring other identity systems because there's ways of integrating and making that valuable across a wide scope of communities and products. At the Data Dude, at Humpty, on X and on Farcaster, just look me up. Love to chat with you. Road to 100. Let's make it 90 by the end of this panel.
And he has a podcast.
And I have a podcast.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for this discussion. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.